Hello everyone, this is part 22 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Has there been any change? Mumbled someone. Not yet. But I've been too busy cleaning up the village, or what's left of it at least, to be here and monitor everything, a second voice said. Why not just ask her? Surely she's been keeping an eye on him, hasn't she? She's just the same as he is. They both just lay there, too shattered to move. The only difference between the two of them is that her body's still intact even if her spirit isn't. His body's just as broken as his heart. The first voice hesitated, then began again in barely more than an undertone. If that were the case, I don't think there would be anything left. Naruto didn't move. He was still and just started at the wall with soulless eyes. He could hear the sounds the two men were making in the room beneath his, just as he could see the wall a few inches from his face, but he understood neither. His mind interpreted nothing. All he knew was that he was very, very cold. Kakashi walked silently through the streets of ravaged Konoha. He kept his eye on the ground and didn't look up as his path wound randomly by the construction sites that had sprung up all over the village. In the weeks since the Sound and Sand were driven out of Konoha, nearly every citizen left alive, as well as all but a few of the most snobbish ninja, had begun volunteering massive amounts of time to aid in the reconstruction of the village. The sounds of hard work were everywhere. Indigenous contractors, all of whom were willingly donating their time and money, were shouting out orders to the workforces over the thuds of hammers on wood and the grinding of saws. Everyone, men and women alike, had taken up tools to try and rebuild, and even children were helping to run lighter supplies of food and materials between the numerous sites. None of these acts of charity, however, were enough to cause Kakashi to look up. His gaze was riveted to the ground, just as it had been for the past 6 days that he'd aimlessly walked about. Occasionally he'd mutter something under his breath, but never more than a few words at a time, and rarely anything less vague than failure or lost. He turned when he heard a yelp of fear from one of the buildings, followed by a loud crash and the sound of splitting timbers. A large bit of scaffolding had collapsed and set to the ground in a large pile of destroyed wood, and people were gathering around it, calling out for someone named Ichika. Kakashi jumped over to the scaffolding and began tearing through it, spinning up whole beams and tossing them to the sides. There was a grunt of effort, and one of the heavy beams rolled to the ground as the person trapped beneath it stood up. It was, of all people, Haruno Sakura. Her red dress was torn and covered in dust and dirt, but she looked unharmed. She was curled around some large bundle, and Kakashi realized it was a small girl, no older than 10 or 11, that the young ninja had her arms wrapped tightly around. Sakura stood up straight, and released the child, who immediately took off running towards a woman in the crowd. The child ran into her mother's arms, crying something about the pink-haired angel, and Kakashi couldn't help but smile beneath his mask. Are you all right? Asked the copy nin. Sakura turned and surprise shot across her face. Oh, Kakashi-sensei. Yeah, I'm fine. I just heard the girl scream and thought, I couldn't just let her, you know. Kakashi nodded approvingly, and said that she'd done well, then looked her over more thoroughly. It wasn't just her dress that had been dirtied. Her hands and arms were covered in sawdust and dirt. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and was equally as dirty. The crude leather belt around her waist looked just a little too tight, and displayed several well-worn hammers and other various tools. Been busy, she said, guessing his thoughts. Obviously, stated the Genin, noticing the calluses and blisters that covered her hands. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were a laborer and not a ninja. Kakashi meant it as a joke, but Sakura looked off towards the destroyed scaffolding and grimaced. I deserve less than that, she mumbled, her voice quivering. The copy nin seed his head off to one side, looking at her quizzically. It was several minutes though until Sakura noticed he was still there, and when she looked at him again, there were tears in the corners of her eyes. Never mind, Sakura said, a little too much cheer in her voice, forcing a smile. I guess I'll just see you around, Kakashi-sensei. She turned around to leave, but Kakashi caught her arm gently and spoke quietly. What's the matter? It was another long while before Sakura spoke. You haven't seen him, have you? Naruto, I mean. The copy nin looked down and let go of her arm. No, I've seen what little bit of him is left. Sakura squinted, trying to contain herself, but a few tears spilled down her cheeks before she hurriedly wiped them away. He's completely broken. A third silence fell over the two of them, neither one knowing what to say. It wasn't until the ruined scaffolding settled with a loud creak and some snapping timbers that either was roused from their thoughts. How long did you stay with him? Kakashi asked, guessing her actions. Sakura winced. The first 2 days I just sat there in his room. I slept on the floor by the bed. I was afraid that if I left that he might, her voice broke and trailed off, that he might not be there when I got back. But on the 3rd day I got up and made breakfast. I took some to Mrs. Yamanaka, and she ate a little. But Naruto, he just laid there. You missed your mother's funeral, Kakashi mumbled. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. Sakura donned that all too fake smile again, but the tears returned to her eyes. Mother, she never liked the idea of a funeral. She was always too happy with life, and it was just one of those mass burials anyway. Kakashi nodded, deciding not to breach that topic again. How was Mrs. Yamanaka? Sakura shook her head. She tried to be happy when I brought her breakfast and thanked me, but she wasn't herself. Sakura shivered. Her eyes were so empty. Ino meant a lot to her, Kakashi muttered. This time, Sakura couldn't hold back the tears, or even try to hide them. Her face broke and a quiet sob escaped her chest. She whirled around to face away from the Genin, trying to compose herself. I hated her, whispered the girl in red, I really did. That witch had everything I wanted and she didn't even have to work for him either. Naruto just fell right into her lap. But, as much as I hated her, Sakura's voice, though it was barely more than a whisper, broke again. I never would have wanted Naruto to go through this. Seeing him so hurt, I never would have thought bad of Ino if I knew it would hurt him so much. Kakashi put a hand on her shoulder and stepped beside her. Not many girls your age are this mature. But don't you see? She choked, I'm not. I tried to drive a wedge between them. Tried to make him choose me over her. I tried to make her hate him so I could. I'm not mature, I was stupid and I was just such a little bee. Don't blame yourself, whispered the Genin, you couldn't have changed what happened to her. Kakashi winced as he referenced his past student. It's not about what happened to her, groaned Sakura, it's about what I tried to do. I was evil. Pain was permeating her words now, so much so Kakashi was struggling to keep himself composed. Listen, said Kakashi, what's done is done. What you did, or tried to do was not right. But that's behind now. Suddenly realization struck the Genin. You've been working non-stop since you left the Yamanakas, haven't you? Sakura nodded. And when you threw yourself under the scaffolding to try and save the child, he trailed off. I was more hoping it would crush me than I was hoping to save the girl, Sakura admitted, wiping the tears from her face. But I'm glad she was all right. Kakashi shook his head. Do you really want Naruto to suffer more? He asked quietly. Do you know how much you and Sasuke mean to him? You're really all he has left, and if something happened to you or Sasuke. A fresh wave of pain rolled across Sakura's features. But how can I live like this? She whispered, looking down, knowing that she stopped. The same way I live with myself, Kakashi muttered, knowing that I was risking this by putting them on the same team. I knew that something like this could happen, but I did it anyway, but I have to keep telling myself to just move forward. Sakura, he addressed her with tenderness in his voice, you have to just keep going. I can't make any promises, the girl droned. For Naruto? He asked. Sakura looked up at him, her eyes bloodshot. Only for him, she whispered. Kakashi nodded. That's all I'm asking. She hesitated, I'm going to go clean up and head over to the Yamanakas again. She may need things done around the house, and my place doesn't matter now, so. That sounds like a good idea. I'm sure Mrs. Yamanaka will like that. Sakura nodded and turned to walk away. This time Kakashi didn't stop her, and soon she had rounded a corner and was out of sight. The copy nin groaned. His conversation with her had broken him out of his own self-loathing, but he wasn't sure he liked exactly what he saw now that he was awake. He didn't get to finish his thought. Kakashi, called a deep voice. The copy nin turned around to see Jiraiya, standing tall in his red and white robes a few paces away. The Sannin had his arms crossed and was looking at Kakashi with some combination of worry and annoyance. Can I have a word with you please? Asked the Sannin. Kakashi nodded and turned fully around to face him fully. What can I do for you, Hokage-sama? The hairs on the back of Jiraiya's end bristled at the name, but he kept his face under control. First, he said quietly, you can stop calling me that. I've decided to decline the position. Leading a village would be too much for me. And second of all, you can follow me. Jiraiya turned briskly around and began to walk away. Kakashi's eye brightened just a little as he jogged to catch up and walked beside the Sannin. The two men moved in silence for several minutes, passing all of the construction until they were in a quieter section of town. Jiraiya stopped and leaned against a wall, arms still folded in front of his chest. The rebuilding is going well, the man in red pointed out. Kakashi nodded uneasily. Everyone is doing their part, and then some. Jiraiya paused, and then exhaled deeply. I'm not going to shoot the S with you Kakashi, he said bluntly. The trouble is far from over. Jiraiya's face was completely composed, but there was sly edge in his voice, venom. Kakashi was taken back, but didn't flinch. How so? Last night I was rummaging through some of the Third's old docents, when an Anbu Black Ops, Nara something, walked into the office and reported to me that there were 4 ninjas sighted on the borders of the Fire Country. He said they were moving towards Konoha, and when he infiltrated their campsite to learn what was going on he discovered that they were sound nin and they wanted something from Uchiha Sasuke. Kakashi froze. I did a little digging, Jiraiya continued, and spoke with Sasuke. He was still recovering from the injury he received from that Gaara person, and didn't know anything special. There was one thing I couldn't miss though. What was that? Asked Kakashi, worried. The smell, Jiraiya said, completely serious. He smelled like Orochimaru. Kakashi paced and shifted his weight uneasily. Do you think our old friend made contact with him? Jiraiya shook his head. I don't know. Sasuke wasn't evasive, but he wasn't very helpful. Kakashi, I want you to keep both your eyes on him from now on. If anything funny happens, Anbu will be there in a flash. I can do that, Kakashi said, but what exactly are you worried about? I understand the urgency of the matter, but what specifically do you think is going on? I don't know, Jiraiya said again, but I think that maybe Orochimaru is trying to get Sasuke to defect to his side. We both know how desperate Sasuke is for revenge on Itachi. If Orochimaru can convince him that he can give Sasuke that kind of power, then. And you think that these sound ninja are the entourage of that message? Kakashi guessed. Jiraiya nodded. If Sasuke's struggling with the idea of defecting as is, then a visit from the sound might push him over the edge. I'll be wherever he is from now on. And Anbu will be watching him every second of every day. Kakashi said. Good, but before all that, said Jiraiya, how's Naruto doing? Kakashi winced again. He's still, not well. Losing Ino was hard on him. Jiraiya nodded sympathetically, closing his eyes and crossing his arms in front of himself. That would be the understatement of the millennia. Do you expect him to recover any time soon, if at all? Kakashi shook his head, no way to know for sure. I'm hoping that Sakura can break him out of it a little. You're gambling again, muttered the Sannin. You lost the last time you staked his feelings. Are you really willing to do it again so lightly? Not lightly, Kakashi said, struggling to keep his voice even. My last gamble was a disaster. Naruto lost everything. I'm hoping that just maybe this will bring him back to us. As you will, said Jiraiya. I'll keep this in my thoughts and do what I can, assuming Naruto ever comes to. Kakashi was silent. SC. There you go, Sakura said pleasantly, setting a tray in Mrs. Yamanaka's lap. The bowl on said tray was filling the room with the scent of apples and cinnamon, as the piping hot soup sent billows of steam up into the blonde woman's face. Thank you Sakura dear, said Mrs. Yamanaka, sitting up in bed just a little and forcing a smile, though I wish you wouldn't go to all this trouble. Sakura stood back and rubbed the back of her head, ruffling the white bandana tied up into her pink hair. She grinned warmly and made a dismissive motion with her other hand. It's nothing at all, she said. Or at least it's the least I could do to say thanks for letting me use your shower. Even so, said Mrs. Yamanaka, leaning back down on the ample pillows and turning to stare out the window. Sakura waited patiently for a moment, then glanced down at the soup. Would you like me to take it back to the kitchen? She asked, trying to sound as polite as possible. Oh, said the woman, just realizing that Sakura had brought her dinner. No, I'm sorry. I was just a little distracted. It's alright, said Sakura, I'll put it in the oven to keep it warm. Or I can make you something else if you like. She leaned down and picked up the tray. Sakura, said Mrs. Yamanaka, I'm not really hungry. But I do appreciate this. The woman's face was drawn, sort of stretched, a mask. Really, I do. But you don't need to worry about me. Sakura set the tray on the nightstand and stood up straight, waiting for her to continue, but Mrs. Yamanaka was quiet for a long time, just staring out the window at the sunset. Still, Sakura waited quietly. Please, the woman sighed, please don't pity me because Ino is S and I'm left to go on. It was a good thing that Sakura had set down the tray, or she very well may have dropped it. But I want to help however I can, she stammered, amazed at how she could speak so matter-of-factly about Ino. A smile creased Mrs. Yamanaka's tired face, but it was a hollow and joyless gesture. She turned to look at Sakura, her turquoise eyes dim and soulless. I know you do, the woman said quietly. But there's nothing you can do for me. Ino is S and I'm not too far behind her. No parent can bury their last child without, she trailed off and a single tear fell onto the blanket across her knees. Without digging their own grave in the process. Don't say that, said Sakura, sitting down on the edge of the bed next to her. It would be a lie to say anything else, said Mrs. Yamanaka. I've buried my son, and my husband. And now I've taken in both of their curs. Sakura drew back, shocked, but not willing to let it hurt her. The Kyuubi that lives in Naruto ked my son, Mrs. Yamanaka continued, and yet I took him in and loved him like a son. Then you ked my husband. Don't worry, I don't hold it against you at all, it's just the irony of fate and I invite you in as I would a dear friend. And finally, another demon has ked both Ino and Naruto. Another demon took away the last of my children, so what am I left with? I've dug all of the graves, so what's one more for me? Naruto needs you, Sakura mumbled, turning away. Mrs. Yamanaka shook her head. No dear, he doesn't. When I found him on that battlefield next to my Ino and that monster, he didn't respond to me. He was already S inside. There's nothing I can do for him. What can I do for him? Asked Sakura. For the first time in a week, a genuine smile crossed Mrs. Yamanaka's lips. It was nothing more than the very corner of her left cheek twitching upwards, but it was real and it was warm. You can show him that his life isn't over. Sakura grimaced and stood up. But he won't listen to me, she whimpered. I was there with him for 2 whole days. I was constantly talking to him, constantly begging him to wake up, but he didn't hear me. Mrs. Yamanaka relaxed back into the pillow and breathed a deep sigh. She closed her eyes and began breathing regularly. For a moment Sakura thought she was asleep, and turned to pick the tray back up. She was at the door, ready to walk to the kitchen when she heard the woman's voice again. Would you like the house? Mrs. Yamanaka asked quietly. I don't have anyone left to leave it to, so you can take it if you want. The deeds is in the strongbox, and the key is under a board in the living room. Sakura turned and smiled at her. That's very kind of you. But I think Naruto deserves it more than I do, so I'll keep the place in good working order for him. How's that? Mrs. Yamanaka didn't answer, so Sakura turned and left, shutting the door behind her. I'm sure Naruto would like that, whispered the blonde woman, especially know it was you. Sakura walked to the kitchen, running a mental list of things to do in her head as she dumped the bowl and rinsed it out. Okay, cleaned the living room, cleaned the dining room, cleaned the kitchen and laundry room, and the halls on both floors. I tidied up Naruto's room 6 times, and took out the garbage. I took care of the bathroom. The list continued on until Sakura was convinced that she had the whole house absolutely immaculate. Nothing left to do, she muttered, even the garden is taken care of. She went to the living room and sat down, not sure what to do from this point on. It wasn't long until she started to fidget and couldn't get comfortable on the plush couch. She laid back on it, sat up, rearranged the cushions, and finally stood up. This isn't working, she groaned. Sakura's thoughts turned to Naruto, and her stomach did a cartwheel. She was suddenly aware of just how quiet the house was, like a crypt. There was really no life here, and her incessant cleaning only made the house look more sterile, more devoid of life. She turned slowly around and began ascending the stairs into the hallway that made up almost a third of the second floor. She looked at the doors, one leading to Mrs. Yamanaka's room, the other leading to where Naruto was resting, and sighed. Sakura carefully stepped up to the latter of the toe and rapped it gently with her knuckles. She knew there would be no response, and there wasn't. Slowly, Sakura turned the knob and opened it up. The room was a deep lavender, strangely dark for the sunset shining in. She almost gasped when she saw Naruto lying on the bed in his black shorts and t-shirt. He was no different than he was the last dozen times she checked on him, but the sight still made her breath struggle to pass the lump in her tea. She walked silently to the bedside and sat on the edge farthest from him. Naruto was, as always, huddled right up against the edge of the bed that touched the wall. He looked so gaunt and thin. It wasn't right, Sakura thought, for anyone to be this way. Only then did she notice the tiny tremors that were running through him. He was shivering in minuscule little bursts that had been imperceptible before. Also, he looked inhumanely pale. Naruto, she whispered, reaching out to touch his hand. Almost by reflex her fingers recoiled from his skin. Naruto was as cold as ice. His alabaster skin, trembling as it was from the shivers, was like a corpse. My God, Sakura muttered. Naruto, please, I know you probably can't hear me, but she stopped herself in mid-sentence. I know you're hurting, but there are people here who still care about you. It may not mean much, but losing you would, I don't think they could handle it. Not surprisingly, Naruto didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. Sakura grimaced, then without a second thought laid down next to Naruto and scooted up against him. Immediately she began to shudder from the cold, but nonetheless, moved in directly up against his cold frame and twined her arms around his chest. Sorry Naruto, she said, managing to keep her teeth from chattering, but you don't get to curl up and A little selfish of me. Probably, but it's awfully selfish of you to think you can just give up like this. Minutes ticked by slowly and Naruto didn't respond, though Sakura could feel him start to stop shivering as their temperatures began to even out a little. She reached over the edge of the bed and grabbed the comforter from its place on the floor, disturbing the week's worth of dust that had settled on it, and pulled it over herself and Naruto. It was about at this point that Sakura's mind caught up with what she was doing. She shook her head and despite telling herself that it was completely fine, and not awkward or anything like that, to curl up with someone to keep them warm, she soon found herself blushing furiously. She buried her face into his chilled shoulder, hoping the cool would do something about the crimson in her cheeks. It didn't, but even so she was enjoying the contact so she didn't move, instead electing to pull the blanket up farther over both of their heads. Time rolled by unnoticed. The crimson light from the sunset began to cast its shadows higher up the walls and onto the ceiling as the sun sank lower into the west. The warmth slowly began to creep back into her arms and chest, so Sakura knew that Naruto must be considerably warmer now, and she smiled to herself. If nothing else she was making him more comfortable and that had to count for something. I'm sorry, she whispered in his ear, for everything I ever did to make it hard on you. I can't say I never wanted to hurt you, but I was so wrong. I'm sorry Naruto and I hope you can find it in you to forgive me. I don't know what you're thinking, but I want you to know that I need you to come back. Sakura felt her heart began to suddenly beat faster and faster until it was fluttering like a frightened bird in her chest. She swallowed the lump forming in her tea and tried to shake herself out of the fear threatening to silence her. Please, was all she could manage to whisper. Abruptly she had become very tired, whether from the stress of trying to bring someone back from the brink of hypothermia, working ceaselessly for days, or some combination of the two, she didn't know. All she could tell was that she was quickly running out of energy. Sakura set her forehead against the back of Naruto's shoulder and closed her eyes. It seemed now that he was the warmer of the two of them and that Sakura was the one shuddering to keep warm. All the more reason, she thought, to press up against him even more. Soon, she was asleep, dreaming of nothing. It wasn't until the first rays of the sun came streaming in through the window and filtered by the thick blanket over her head, that Sakura realized she was awake. She rolled over, stretching widely and pulled the comforter off of her face. Something was missing though. She looked down at the bed and nearly screamed. Naruto was gone. The pink-haired girl leapt to her feet, too startled to shriek, and ran to Mrs. Yamanaka's room. The bed was neatly made, but the blonde woman was missing too. Now she gasped. Was this a nightmare? Had she really gone to sleep at all, or? Sakura had no idea what was going on, but managed to sprint down the stairs, calling out Naruto's name with every breath. She bounded into the kitchen and froze. Oh, you're awake? Kakashi said, turning from the sink, where her was rinsing out a bowl, to look at her. Ah, Sakura managed. Kakashi was the last person she expected to see. Have you seen Naruto? She asked, the panic quickly returning to her voice. Kakashi nodded. Just a few minutes ago actually. He thought you might wake up soon, so he asked me to wait for you. Now I'm confused, the pink-haired girl said. How long have I been asleep? What's been going on? The masked nin grimaced. 2 days, he said quietly, since we talked last at least. 2 days. Sakura gasped, I slept away a whole day. Kakashi nodded. You were very tired, but quite a bit happened while you were sleeping. Sakura was hesitant. Like what? Where are Naruto and Mrs. Yamanaka? Mrs. Yamanaka, Kakashi's voice trailed off for just a second, passed away last night. And Naruto is headed off on a mission in just a few minutes. This was too much to absorb all at once, and Sakura's face reflected the sheer panic in her mind. Listen, Kakashi said, reading her mood, there's a lot to explain because a lot happened, but if you want to see Naruto before he goes after Sasuke, you need to leave now and run for the North Gate. Sasuke. Sakura nearly screamed, what happened to? Just go. Kakashi barked, there'll be time to fill you in later, but Naruto's leaving in. Sakura didn't wait for him to finish. She turned around and bolted straight out the door, not bothering to close it behind her. She ran as fast as her sore muscles would allow and beelined for the northernmost gate into Konoha. Dodging and weaving between the thick crowds of people, she made her way past the construction sites until she came to one of the larger roads which she knew would lead her where she needed to go. Turning left and sprinting all out, Sakura soon burst into Forum surrounded by houses that lay in front of the massive wooden doors. She scanned all of the dozens of faces, hoping desperately to see Naruto's, but he wasn't there. Damn, she cursed, running towards the open gate. She sprang to the entrance and looked down the road, but saw no one she recognized. Damn it, she muttered again, I missed him. Missed who? Asked a scratchy voice from behind her. Sakura turned to see an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s, leaning on a cane behind her. His bald head was reflecting the sunlight like a mirror into her eyes, so she shifted around to get a clear look at him. A friend of mine, Sakura sighed, crossing her arms in front of herself and fighting off a shudder. You didn't happen to see him, did you? He was a short blonde with spiky hair and blue eyes, probably wearing a black combat suit. The old man thought for a second, tapping his cane on the ground as if to set a beat to his thoughts. To Sakura, whose face was beginning to turn red with impatience, it seemed like he would shrivel up and blow away before she got an answer out of him. Oh yeah, blurted the man abruptly, swinging his cane up and nearly hitting Sakura in the side of her head. I know who you're talking about. Please, growled Sakura, I don't have much time. He left the village not a minute before you showed up, and as far as I could tell he was heading northeast. If you head that way you might catch him. He was on his own but he looked to be in a hurry. Thank you, Sakura shouted over her shoulder, already halfway to the gate. Hey, laughed the old man, a wide smile on his face, no problems. Sakura ran down the road taking long strides and soon found herself following the trail into the forest. Her eye caught a flash of movement rounding a corner ahead of her and leaving the path. Naruto, she called out, hoping it was him. There was no answer, but she jumped to the point where the other figure had left the trail, and stared off into the dense undergrowth. Sure enough, standing about 5 meters into the forest, was Naruto. He was wearing his black Anbu suit and staring off into the distance. Naruto, she yelled again, a smile on her lips as she ran up beside him. Sakura, he said quietly without looking at her. It was more of an acknowledgement than anything else. I'm glad you're up and around, she said, trying to sound cheerful. I was worried sick about you. Sakura could see the corner of his mouth twitch up just a little, but other than that he didn't react. I'm sorry, he said under his breath. Sakura faltered. She had known he wasn't going to be well, but she never guessed that he'd be quite this distant. Naruto, she said, letting her facade fall, don't make me beg. Come back with me. For the first time, Naruto turned to face her, but she couldn't meet his eyes. Sakura just stared at the 2 feet or so of dirt between them. Shortly though, she felt his hand on her chin and he lifted her head to look in her eyes. There were no words she could say. Sakura couldn't stand to look at his face, knowing that it would be painted with bold strokes of pain and that she had, in some way, contributed to that, so she closed her eyes. Don't be angry with me, she whispered, please. I'm so sorry. Look at me, Sakura, he said, not unkindly. Sakura opened her eyes just enough to see the rough outline of his face, but stopped there. For nearly a minute they just stood there, neither one speaking, until suddenly Sakura found herself caught up in his arms, a gentle embrace. I'm sorry, Naruto said, but time is running out. Sakura's eyes snapped open and she looked up into his. They were exactly the way she remembered, sharp blue and shining like sapphires in a furnace. His face, however, was different. His normally bright grin was completely gone, replaced by drawn lips. The furious battle, the massive use of chakra, and the week without eating had stripped his cheeks of any baby fat, leaving his features harder and more defined, not adult yet, but not childish either. He looked too weary with age to be only 12. I'm so sorry, Sakura nearly cried, throwing her arms around him. I didn't ever want to hurt you. She felt Naruto's grip on her loosen, then fall away as he put his hands on her shoulders and held her back at arm's length. We can talk once I bring Sasuke back, Naruto said flatly, but like I said, time's running out. The tears were streaming down Sakura's face, but she held his gaze and spoke evenly. I'll be waiting for you when you get back. Please, hurry. Naruto nodded, and turned around. He started to run but stopped a few strides away from her and hesitated. For what seemed like an eternity Naruto looked at the dirt while Sakura stared at his back. I'm not sure what's going to happen today, Naruto said quietly, barely loud enough for her to hear, but there's no use waiting up for me anymore. And then Naruto was gone. He disappeared in a blur of speed into the gloom of the forest canopy. Sakura waited for several long minutes, staring off after him, wanting desperately to follow him, to beg his forgiveness again, to offer anything in return for his happiness. It wasn't until she noticed a chill wind blowing through the forest that she woke from her thoughts, turning to Konoha and dragging her feet as she slowly made her way back. She wasn't crying. She had long since run out of tears, despite having none of her questions answered or any of her fears alleviated. This was the closest thing she could think of to hell. Sakura, Kakashi's voice asked as the pink-haired girlie re-entered the village, how are you doing? Sakura didn't even bother to look up at him, but instead just stopped and rested her back against the cold stone of the wall. I've been better. He just left, didn't he? Asked Kakashi. Sakura nodded. In more ways than one, she muttered to herself. That's what I was afraid of, said the copy nin. I guess you want to know what's going on. Sure, said the girl in red, too numb to really care one way or another. She glanced at her teacher, then off towards the distance where she imagined Naruto, and prayed he'd come back. A chill ran down her spine. Well, Kakashi began, long story short, Sasuke has decided to defect to the sound. Sakura raised an eyebrow in response, though she was far less worried about what Sasuke had chosen to do over Naruto's safety. Last night I went to check on Sasuke, fearing for his safety, and he was gone. The Anbu I'd posted outside his home were missing, so I immediately went to Jiraiya to see if he knew what was going on. Jiraiya didn't, but while I was speaking with him, Nara Shikamaru came into the office and reported that he'd spotted 4 sound nin leaving Konoha with Sasuke in their company. According to Shikamaru, Sasuke wasn't resisting. Sakura gulped. And Naruto's going out there, alone, to bring him back. Kakashi nodded. There wasn't time to put together a team, so I went to the Yamanakas, hoping Naruto was breaking out of his stupor. Luckily enough, he was, thanks to you no doubt, so it didn't take much to convince him to help us chase after Sasuke. But you sent him out alone, Sakura protested. Kakashi put his hands up as if to defend himself. I offered to go with him, but he insisted on going in solo. I don't know why, but I know he can handle it and, well, it might be good for him, considering. Maybe, Sakura muttered, cutting Kakashi off, toxin in her words. Or he could wind up and not come back at all. Don't worry, said Kakashi, putting a hand on Sakura's shoulder. She grimaced. I just don't think I could stand seeing him hurt any more than he already is. Kakashi nodded. Naruto's a strong person, no doubts there, and I'm sure that if we give him some time, eventually he'll heal. Everything's just moving so fast, said Sakura. Everything's changed over the course of just a few days, and I feel like I'm lost in it all. We all are, said the copy nin. But sooner or later, things will settle down. I hope so. Sakura looked up towards the western sky and sighed, her breath shaking. There was a long pause between the two of them, until Kakashi finally broke the silence. Did you tell him how you feel? Sakura closed her eyes and her head drooped. How can I? She whispered. What kind of monster would I be if I just swept in to try and take him after he lost Ino? How could I live with myself? It may just be what saves him, the copy nin uttered. From what? If anything, I'd just wind up hurting him more, and I just can't. Sakura, said Kakashi smoothly, Naruto's not holding anything against you. You need to forgive yourself. SC. The roar of the waterfall was a magnificent thing. It thundered above any other sound in the massive valley lake that is plunged into, filling the whole basin with the sounds of crashing waves and the brilliant sparkle of hundreds of tiny rainbows. Even more spectacular were the two massive statues, carved from the very stone of the river's walls as they met the edge of the cliff. There was a reason this was called the Valley of the End. The toe monuments were of Konoha's Hokages, each one watching the other to mark the edge of the fire country. These statues were, in essence, the symbolic guardians of the nation. But more than that even, this was where everything had come to a head. This was where the crux was to be seen. On one of the massive statues, stood Naruto. His black suit was a stark contrast to the startlingly white light reflecting from the monument. He was reared up to his full height, a light breeze wafting his hair from side to side as he looked on in dread at the figure across from him. Standing atop the second monument, was Uchiha Sasuke, glaring back at Naruto with eyes tinted yellow. The once collar-like seal around his neck had now crept down his shoulders and arms, forming intricate manacle tattoos around his wrists. His face was adorned by a seiei grin, exposing unnaturally white teeth. Sasuke looked between Naruto and the valley below, then back at Naruto and stood up straight. He flexed his arms and back like a cat and strutted around atop the statue like he was trying to make a tough decision. Why not do this the easy way, Naruto? He called out in a voice too slick to be his own. Just let me go to Orochimaru-sama and neither of us have to s. Is that simple enough? Naruto closed his eyes and shook his head. Jiraiya had warned him about this part. No. Naruto answered loudly, pain raking his voice. It's that seal. Orochimaru's messing with your mind, influencing your thoughts. It's written all over you, you even have his eyes now. You have to fight him. Even as he spoke them, Naruto knew the words sounded overdramatic and useless, but what else could he say? Sasuke just began to chuckle a little. Why would I fight him? He can give me the power I've always dreamed of. Naruto winced. You used not to care so much about power, Sasuke. You were over your obsession with revenge. You were almost happy. Sasuke now burst out, almost in a fit of laughter. If you say so, but one thing you never seemed to notice was that I never once did anything that didn't bring me closer to King Itachi. This is just my biggest step in that direction. Sasuke, Naruto growled quietly, dropping his head just a little. I'm not going to just let you leave. You have two options. Ooh. An ultimatum, laughed Sasuke, you've changed, that's not like you. Naruto continued, undeterred. You can either fight Orochimaru, or you can fight me. It's up to you now. Sasuke stopped laughing for a moment and mockingly pondered decision. Slowly he reached around his back and pulled out kunai. He pointed it at Naruto and grinned. Naruto closed his eyes, but put his hands on the grips of his two wakizashi. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.